Sábado, 29 de julho, você vai ver nesta edição 25 pessoas feridas no acidente entre dois trens na estação de Perus, na Grande São Paulo, ainda estão sendo atendidas em 5 hospitais da região. 9 pessoas morreram. Você está assistindo a Globo News, o seu canal de jornalismo 24 horas no ar. De acordo com a Companhia Paulista de Trens Metropolitanos, 200 pessoas estão neste momento trabalhando no local do acidente. Os bombeiros continuam com a Operação Rescaldo para verificar se há mais vítimas embaixo dos escombros. O Instituto de Criminalística enviou desde a madrugada vários peritos ao local. Eles vão elaborar um laudo detalhado sobre as causas do desastre.
Homens da CPTM e do Corpo de Bombeiros continuam trabalhando aqui na estação Perus, na zona oeste de São Paulo. Até agora, há pelo menos 9 mortos e mais de 100 feridos. A CPTM, a Companhia de Trens Metropolitanos de São Paulo, ainda está estudando as causas do acidente. Já se sabe que o que provocou o choque entre os trens foi a falta de freios do trem que desceu 5 quilômetros de uma estação até outra e bateu no trem que estava aqui parado, esperando passageiros na estação de Perus. Uma passarela foi arrastada mais ou menos 50 metros. O clima aqui no local é muito tenso. Os familiares estão indo para o IML e para os hospitais da região em busca de notícias ainda, porque muitas vítimas ainda não foram localizadas. Rosângela Santos para o Em Cima da Hora.
Os corpos das 9 pessoas que morreram no acidente de trem ontem à noite em São Paulo já estão no Instituto Médico Legal no centro da cidade. Os feridos estão sendo atendidos nos hospitais da região. O Hospital de Perus, por ser o mais próximo do local do acidente, recebeu o maior número de vítimas.
75 pessoas passaram aqui nesta noite, logo após o acidente. 15 casos mais graves foram encaminhados para o Hospital de Pirituba, já que aqui é um pronto atendimento e não tem centro cirúrgico. Outras 60 pessoas, então, receberam atendimento aqui. Elas tinham trauma, fizeram exames de raio-x, pontos, curativos, e as pessoas que estavam em choque nervoso tomaram calmante e aí foram liberadas. Apenas 2 pessoas continuaram aqui até esta manhã em observação. Um senhor de 41 anos tinha o estado estável e recebeu alta e foi liberado. Agora, uma menina de 1 ano...
Mas o diretor de operações da companhia de trens, por enquanto, também só tem perguntas.
Por que esse trem começou a se mover? Porque esse trem, ao se mover, ele interrompeu a energia dos trens que estavam em Perus.
Sabendo que um desastre ia acontecer, os homens que controlavam a ferrovia ainda tentaram uma última saída: desviar o trem.
Infelizmente também as 2 chaves, apesar de acionadas, o trem superou essas chaves e continua na mesma rota.
A companhia de trens não apresentara até hoje à noite a testemunha-chave do acidente, o maquinista Oswaldo Pierucci. Ele foi localizado pelo Jornal Nacional numa cidade próxima a São Paulo.
No momento eu não quero falar nada mesmo sobre isso. Já estou muito abalado. No momento eu não quero falar nada ainda não. Eu quero aguardar.
Terminaram neste sábado os encontros entre ministros na reunião anual da ASEAN, a Associação dos Países do Sudeste Asiático. A novidade este ano foi a presença da Coreia do Norte, que deu um grande passo para romper o isolamento internacional.
A secretária de Estado americana Madeleine Albright disse aos jornalistas que o encontro de sexta-feira com o ministro do Exterior da Coreia do Norte foi importante para trazer estabilidade para o sudeste da Ásia. Com a presença da Coreia do Norte na reunião da ASEAN, o Canadá e a Nova Zelândia concordaram em normalizar as relações com o país comunista. Neste sábado, Albright se encontrou em separado com os ministros da Índia, da Indonésia e da Tailândia, país anfitrião da reunião. Ela garantiu que os Estados Unidos não vão intervir na Indonésia, abalada pela violência religiosa e pelo separatismo.
Depois de quase 8 meses afastado das competições por causa de uma contusão no joelho, o judoca Aurélio Miguel voltou bem aos tatames. Aurélio venceu hoje suas 3 lutas na Copa Baixada Fluminense por equipes realizada no Rio de Janeiro. Como estava com 105 quilos, 5 acima do peso de sua categoria, que é de meio pesado, Aurélio foi inscrito entre os pesados. No próximo final de semana, Aurélio Miguel participa da seletiva olímpica, que vai definir a equipe que vai aos Jogos de Sydney em setembro. Agora, 9 horas e 7 minutos, você assiste ao programa Milênio. A gente volta na próxima edição com o Jornal das 10, hein? Até já!
esporte. Não tem pra ninguém.
No Espaço Aberto desta semana, uma entrevista com o vice-presidente da Associação Mundial dos Sobreviventes do Nazismo, o jornalista Ben Abraham, que mora em São Paulo, já escreveu 15 livros sobre esse assunto. Ele próprio sobrevivente do nazismo, nasceu na Polônia, perdeu a família em campos de concentração, viveu em campos de concentração e nos conta essa dura história. Nos fala também do trabalho, para que isso não aconteça nunca mais, e da polêmica omissão do Papa Pio XII naquele momento. Espaço Aberto, você não pode perder.
Espaço Aberto, com Chico Pinheiro, neste sábado, 9h30 da noite.
Alain de Botton, o nome soa francês, na verdade é suíço, mas ele é inglês. O entrevistado desse milênio é um escritor que pegou um gênero super popular e o reinventou de uma maneira erudita e original. Sabe livro de autoajuda? Conselhos e dicas de como viver, amar, fazer sucesso, etc. Alain de Botton pegou as perguntas e dúvidas que nos atormentam, mas encontrou respostas nos livros de grandes escritores e filósofos. Proust, Sêneca, Montaigne, Sócrates, Schopenhauer, Nietzsche, o melhor da filosofia para ajudar no seu dia a dia. Os livros são saborosos e inteligentes. Confira na entrevista.
Tell me a little bit about these first books.
Well, my first book was called Essays in Love, and actually that was a big success in Brazil. In Brazil, it was the biggest success of any country per capita, so I was very surprised and pleased. I don't know why that was, but it's fascinating. But it was really a look at a very ordinary love story, boy meets girl love story. And rather than simply telling the story, it was also an analysis of the story. It was a selection of kind of essays on certain moments in a relationship, so, you know, seduction and, you know, regret, etc. All these emotions that novelists tend to describe quite quickly. So they'll say, you know, and then they fell in love and then they went on honeymoon, etc. And it's all very quick. And what I wanted to do was try and slow the tempo down and just pick out certain moments and certain things that really interested me. And so it was kind of a novel, but it was also kind of a non-fiction. It was a strange hybrid book.
And why do you think people enjoy so much love? Because they go into it sort of instinctively, and then reading and thinking about it, something that, well, you tend not to do so much, and then, well, there's this book. Well, that's interesting. It's me.
Yes, I think love is one of the most difficult and painful experiences in anyone's life, and it's a general obsession. I mean, it's a real nuisance. It takes up so much time, and people waste enormous amounts of money and energy on it. But it's unavoidable. I mean, people just do end up thinking about love and sex and relationships an awful lot. And most of literature, I mean, about 90% of literature is basically about love in various ways. Normally unhappy love, conflicts in love. And, you know, it's a very, very painful area. And I think that reading books is a wonderful way of discovering what's going on in other people, and also of understanding maybe things that have happened in yourself, which before you hadn't understood. So it's kind of natural that people will want to make that connection with this very painful and central topic in their life, love.
But then you went for this, the Proust one, how Proust can change your life. So it's sort of a different tack in terms of...
Yes, I mean, I suppose my fiction books always had a kind of non-fiction element, and then I decided to write a non-fiction book that wouldn't be a totally straight book. I mean, there are hundreds of books called, you know, Proust's theory of the novel, and, you know, written by academics that are very boring. And what I wanted to try and get to the heart of is, why does this person matter? You know, why does Proust matter? And also at the same time to ask, why does reading matter? What is the point of reading? And to do so in a format that kind of parodies a little bit the self-help book. There are many of these self-help books, like, you know, how the Buddha can change your life, or, you know, how...
Alain de Botton.
Yeah, or whoever, exactly. And I find those self-help books very, well, I think they're very interesting. I mean, I think most of them are ridiculous, like they don't help at all. But I think there's one very interesting idea at the heart of them, which is that at some level, reading a book is going to help you to change your life, is going to do something for you, is actually going to be of practical use. And many people read, when they read, they think, oh, reading is just escaping my life. It's just getting away from everything. It's like taking a holiday in a foreign country, etc.
It's not bad.
And it was not bad. But for me, I think reading has, you know, what I most enjoy in reading is when it connects with things in my own life. So that I read something and I think, oh yes, I understand something now in my own life, or, you know, or it just, you know, it takes me somewhere where I kind of expand my own interest in something, or, do you see what I mean? That there's something more practical involved. That's the way that I read. And Proust is a wonderful guide to all sorts of things. I think anyone who's read Proust will tend to feel that their eyes have been opened to many, many things in life that they previously just hadn't really realized. And I wanted to talk about this.
Well, let's go through the chapters and how to love life today, how to read for yourself. Well, let's stop on this one. We thought about, well, the enjoyment of books and the way that you can relate to books, and Proust, there's a lot of Proust in it, and lots of you as well.
Yes, I mean, Proust famously said that whenever we read a book, we constantly meet people we know. And this could seem quite striking when the book in question is, let's imagine, a Proust book in which the characters are from the fin de siècle, Paris, and they wear top hats and they ride in carriages, and, you know, they have 12-course dinners. And one could think, well, who are the people there in, you know, in my life? But I think the astonishing thing is the way that people don't really change. And even if the clothes change and the hats change and the decor changes, basically people remain the same, which is why, you know, someone in Brazil can read a book about people in France in the 19th century, you know, and it actually, you know, everyone relate to it, and that, you know, a character like, you know, Odette de Crécy in Proust, you know, she's around in Rio now, kind of thing, and she's around in London, and she's around in a lot of places, and the same types keep recurring. And I think that what literature does is to sharpen our sensitivity to certain types, so that we can go around and then think, oh yes, this person is just like this character in Proust, and Proust has enabled me to see something about this person.
A feeling of closeness.
A feeling of closeness. I mean, there's many things. You recognize things, a feeling of recognition, but also a feeling of learning, that things that had seemed confused suddenly seem clear. And also, sometimes you feel less lonely. Proust wonderfully describes the kind of madness of love. He describes how he's in love with this a young woman called Albertine, and whenever she's being really nice to him, he feels that he's quite bored and he'd like to have affairs with other women. And this is a feeling that I think many men feel, particularly young men, and it's not a very nice thing to feel, and one feels like a real bastard for thinking this. And then you read it in Proust, and Proust has such a humane treatment of this very awkward topic, and it helps one to reconcile oneself to this area of life, and you think, you know, I'm not alone in this, and nor am I necessarily a monster. It's just the madness of life. So it helps to make us more acceptable to ourselves, often, literature.
Yeah, they were talking about this love part in Proust, and how there's the chapter, How to Be Happy in Love. And there's a very interesting part about this feeling of boringness or dullness of someone that you are living with for years, and that you feel that you know him. And what's the relation, the link that he made into the Noah's Ark and your loved one?
Yes, well, he makes fascinating. First of all, he starts by talking about the telephone. Proust was writing at a time when the telephone had just recently been invented. And when the telephone was first invented, everyone said, God, it's a wonderful thing, you can call up people, blah, blah, blah. And then within a few years, Proust noticed that people got quite bored by the telephone. In fact, they got angry with it sometimes. They thought it didn't work well enough. They complained about it, etc. And Proust connected this attitude to the telephone with our attitude to love and relationships generally. At first, we think it's all wonderful, and then soon, you know, etc. And you know, he says at one point, he says that the telephone, it's a very, you know, it's a very wonderful instrument, but we forget how wonderful it is. And it's exactly the same thing happens with love. There's something about something being familiar, which means that we forget to appreciate it. Proust says, he then makes this connection with Noah and his ark. Of course, Noah was shut up in his ark for 40 days. He couldn't see the world. The world was all in, was all submerged in water. And Proust said that Noah would never have loved the earth as much as when he was in his ark, when he couldn't see it. And also that he would never have appreciated it as much. And I think it's just a general phenomenon of absence, that it helps us to appreciate certain things. We're very bad at appreciating something which is always there. And Proust sees this as the real problem of love.
Because we've been so long with some person, we start forgetting about what we love about them?
Yes, I mean, Proust really thinks that we forget to see them. We don't see what's always around. In the same way, he compares it to living in a house. When you're living in a house you've lived in for a long time, you just don't see the house.
Yeah.
You don't see it.
After a while, you don't see it.
You literally don't see it, and he thinks it's the same thing with love. Whereas if you move house, let's say, and you put the picture in a new place, you suddenly think, oh God, it's a really nice picture. So it's just a kind of unfortunate mechanism within ourselves. We don't appreciate what's always there.
And there's a part that's maybe linked a little bit to this, that when there was this story about an article, the French newspaper, they asked people to say what they would do if they knew that they were going to die in about a couple of hours or in a certain period of time. And of course, then you realize that, well, I gotta live, I gotta do what I want and what I love.
I mean, Proust was asked towards the end of his life. A newspaper asked him, you know, if you were told that the world was going to end in the next day, what would you do between the moment of this announcement and the thing? And he said immediately. Proust's answer was immediately the world would seem very, very interesting. I'd feel that there was so much left to do. I'd run to the Louvre. I'd look at some paintings. I'd try to go to India and look at some things. I'd fall in love. Blah blah blah. But then he ended his answer to the newspaper going, but actually the world's not going to end tonight, and we'll forget about this, we'll forget about what's interesting, and the world will seem quite dull to us again. And one could say, well, Proust was just having fun, this was just a trivial answer to a newspaper. But I think the whole of his novel can in a way be read through this answer to this question, because his novel is called In Search of Lost Time. And really what the title means is in search of how we can stop wasting time. Lost time in French, temps perdu, means not just time that's passed, but also time that's wasted. Yeah. And it's really a guide. His book is almost a guide to how we can stop wasting time and start to appreciate life.
How did you feel when at start people would say, well, this looks like a self-help book, although it's very different. It has sort of the same root.
Yes. Well, I don't really mind. I mean, I have many complexes in life, but I've had I had spent a lot of years in higher education. I studied at Cambridge for a long time, so I don't feel that I'm in any danger of, becoming in myself, becoming really a self-help writer. And I think it's important to, at the same time, I spent a little bit too long with academics, and I know that they can be very arrogant and say, we mustn't talk to people who haven't been to university, we must write books that can only be read by other academics, we must put footnotes on everything, etc. So I think it's kind of a responsibility to be able to talk clearly to another human being, and especially when you're writing about literature. Literature is not science. It's not like aeronautical science. It's not like computing, which can be obscure for good reasons. If you write a book on Proust, there's no reason that it has to be a difficult book. And so I wanted to kind of play with the fact that this really was a book for everyone, and also that it had a purpose to it, because many books, particularly works of literary criticism, have no purpose. Like, it's a book and you don't know why, you don't know what the point of reading this might be. And I wanted to focus this book and say, I'm really trying to draw out the kinds of things that matter for me in Proust and that I think can matter to other people. I think one can be practical without dumbing something down, without making it seem trivial. So it was a kind of, I wanted to be at once serious, very serious, and also playful. This is something that some people find hard to understand. There was one critic who reviewed my book on Proust and said, what I can't understand is this a joke or is it serious? And what I wanted to say is, well, it's basically serious, but I think I think you can have fun along the way. And I very much believe that writing should be about amusing and entertaining, and at the same time teaching and learning. I think if one looks, for example, to philosophy, many ancient philosophers are writing books that are, in a way, self-help books, but they're very good. They're doing this very well. So I want to bring a kind of greater ambition to a genre which has in recent years become very cheapened and made to seem ridiculous, but I think has something proper and serious at its center.
Well, you managed to do that with this Consolations of philosophy as well. You brought some philosophers that were thought of, or the names, wow, these are big names, I would ever read, Socrates or Seneca, and then you sort of translated them to us. And how did you have this idea to use these thought, well, it was of Proust first and then the others?
Well, I suppose I was always very interested in philosophy. Not all philosophy, because many philosophers are very boring, but there were certain philosophers that I really liked. And when I thought about who they were and what they were doing, it seemed that they were kind of the philosophers who were interested in wisdom. And of course, wisdom is a kind of broad term, but really that means how to live well, how to live in everyday life in a way that is, you know, calm and sensible and rational, etc., etc. This is something, of course, I find very difficult. I think many people find difficult. We're constantly tormented by doubts and anxieties and passions. And so there were certain philosophers who seemed to offer something which was really very practical. And yet these were philosophers who were not taught in universities, really. Someone like Seneca or Epicurus. One doesn't hear about these people anymore. And yet it seemed to me that they had very interesting things to say. So I came up with the idea of a book that is really a series of 6 essays on 6 philosophers who seem to have very interesting perspectives on 6 quite common problems.
Let's go slowly from one. Let's start, well, in order with the book. Well, it's Socrates first. Unpopularity.
Well, yes, I mean, Socrates I looked at through the problem, as you say, of unpopularity. And it's really, in our culture, we very much believe that if many people think you're right, you're right. And if many people think you're wrong, you're wrong. Socrates is a shining example, and has been for many centuries, of someone who stood up for what he believed, even though what he believed wasn't agreed by other people in Athens in his time. And he died for his beliefs. He famously, believed that he was right in something. Other people thought he was wrong, and he went to his death for it. And Socrates is an example of the way that one can think logically, and by thinking logically, you realize that other people are not thinking logically, and you derive courage to stand up for what you believe. Socrates wants us to say, hang on, let's ask questions always. Let's say, does this make sense? Not just, accepting the tradition, but questioning the tradition and seeing if there's any logic behind it. And in areas where there is no logic behind the tradition, having the courage to say, well, maybe I will live a slightly different way.
Second one, not having enough money.
Oh, of course, I mean, you say in Brazil, which has extremes of poverty that are not known in Britain, but many people in Britain also feel that they don't have enough money, which I think is very key to Epicurus' point, which is that however much money you have, most people think that they don't have enough money, point 1. Point 2, people with a lot of money tend not necessarily to be any happier than people with less money. And Epicurus looks at these two phenomena and thinks, what's going on? And his answer is that once you have a certain amount of money, enough to ensure food and shelter, and protection from the elements, money no longer is that important. There are other things which are very important, and these are the key ingredients of happiness. And he believed that these were principally 3 things. 1, friendship. He thinks friendship is enormously important, and that when society is too fragmented, people get very unhappy. And I think this is a very modern problem, particularly of people living in cities. Epicurus also believed that it was very important to be independent, and that much unhappiness in life comes from having your life dictated to you by other people. And he believed that it was much more important to have less money and to be free than to have lots of money and be dictated to by other people. And I think many people who work in offices and hierarchies would agree with that. He also believed, Epicurus also believed that many of our problems and our inner disturbances comes from the fact that we don't think enough about ourselves and about our own emotions. And that so we're often very confused. And that if you're anxious about something but you have no time, and you're always just rushing from one thing to the next, the anxiety will grow like a mushroom. And that it's very important to be able to make time to reflect on your life and to say, okay, hang on, let me just try and think about what's happened and where I'm going and what this worry is about. And he believed that if we have these 3 things, we won't need that much money, and that a lot of the problem in life is that we don't have these 3 things and try and make money as a kind of substitute for, as a relief from anxieties or as an escape from loneliness, etc.
Third one, frustration. Seneca. Well, frustration is part as well of a very common part of our everyday life.
Of course, and Seneca believed that many of our frustrations come from having the wrong expectations of the world. And it's very true that in life generally, if you tell yourself, the traffic is bad, so it's going to take me an hour to get to the airport, and then the traffic is bad and it takes you an hour, you just think, you know, you're not happy about this, but you're calm about it. You think, you know, it takes a long time to get to the airport. If you thought, you know, I'm going to get to the airport in 15 minutes, and then suddenly you see the road jammed, you're likely to get angry, you blow the horn, etc., etc. And Seneca would have argued that this is absolutely crucial to the way that anger works and our reaction to frustration, that if you set the right expectations, you will respond much better to frustrations. And he believed that we're on the whole much too optimistic about how life will go. We tend to think always that things are going to go well for us. Ultimately, we also think at some level that we're not going to die, and the people close to us are not going to die. And this is mad, and this is why Seneca believed that we have to be much more pessimistic and much more realistic, he would have said. And he believed that every morning we should go through an exercise which he called a premeditation, and that is we should meditate on all the kinds of things that could go wrong in the day ahead. We should spend a little bit of time, he said, about 20 minutes lying in bed, meditating on everything that could go wrong. So we should tell ourselves the traffic might be bad, our family might be killed, we might lose our job, and at the end of this, nothing can surprise you. You know, you will have seen
if nothing happens, you'll have a wonderful time.
Exactly. And if it does happen, you're not going to scream, because you will know, you know.
Inadequacy, Montaigne.
Montaigne is a wonderful philosopher. He's very human, and he's very keen to remind us really of the fact that having a big brain is not necessarily the answer to everything. Many philosophers had said, you know, being a rational person is great, and if you read a lot of books, you can be very clever, and you can live a perfect life. Montaigne has a much more modest attitude. He thinks we're all a bit mad. He tells us we're all a bit mad, our lives are all a bit mad, and we have to accept this, and we have to be much more humble in our attitude. He talks about the body a lot, and about the need to accept our bodies in ways that many philosophers hadn't. So he's calling for a kind of modesty about how much having a mind can really do for us. And I think this can be a very consoling and helpful way when sometimes we think we should always be in control of everything. He wanted to remind us really of the body and the natural functions of life, which he believed get lost when we disappear into the world of academia or books and yes, exactly, that we're animals and we have to accept the animal side of ourselves. We should joke about it. We shouldn't be so serious. We should joke about it and accept our bodies much more. And he believed, and I think it's a big tradition, we see this in Christianity, you know, there's a real difficulty about accepting the body. And Montaigne, you know, is a kind of pagan philosopher who wants us to be more at home in our bodies.
Broken heart, Schopenhauer, every day.
Well, Schopenhauer is one of the first and only philosophers really to talk about love and to try and get us to feel better about love. Although that said, he's quite pessimistic. Really, he starts by asking us why we fall in love with certain people and why our marriages are so often unhappy. And he thinks the reason is that we often fall in love with people who we wouldn't have been friends with, but who are going to help us to make healthy children. He thinks that love is really all about making children, and that and so we often fall in love with someone who is going to help us to make a healthy child, but isn't going to be someone who is an ideal companion. And he thinks this is the great sort of tragedy of love, that we have almost two projects in relationships. The project to make healthy children, the project to have a nice time with someone. And he thinks these two projects very rarely come together, and that in a way the biological priority is always healthy children. Schopenhauer was writing in the 19th century in Germany, but I think nowadays many modern geneticists would agree that love is a biological force that's all about, you know, making children. That's what it's about. Otherwise they wouldn't be there. And I think this is a very, you know, one could say this is a very anti-romantic view, which I think it is. But Schopenhauer thinks it's better to know the facts, you know, rather than saying love is all about trust and beauty. And it's better to say, you know, what love is, it's about making children. And that if we know the blunt facts, we'll be less surprised when things go wrong.
Difficulties, Nietzsche.
So Nietzsche is another German 19th century philosopher, very fascinating because many philosophers up to Nietzsche had said the good life is a life without pain or disturbance or excitement. If you're leading a wise life, everything is peaceful and calm, and it's the imagery of a philosopher, someone who's very calm, not disturbed, doesn't go through great crises, etc. Nietzsche examined this idea and then said it was ridiculous. He said that anyone with a good life is going to go through a lot of difficulty. They're going to wake up at 3 o'clock in the night screaming with pain. They're going to be in despair. They're going to go through anxiety. And he said, you know, this is normal. It's absolutely normal to have difficulties. And we mustn't imagine that that a good life is supposed to be pain-free.
Well, philosophy then can be brought back to us. Can it help our life?
I think definitely. It does depend on what philosopher you choose, and just like which book you choose, it's always the choice. But I think for me, in the Consolations of philosophy, I looked at philosophers that I really love and that I think can really help. Just as in my book on Proust, I looked at a writer who I believe really is unique and wonderfully wise. And for me, you know, reading should be all about wisdom and learning to live a better life.
Oh, thank you very much for the interview.
Promoção da revista Época. Por apenas 5 de R$19,90, você vai receber a melhor revista semanal por 6 meses, um cartão de crédito com unidade paga, além de uma assinatura semestral grátis de outra revista da editora Globo. Você vai ter a melhor informação e paz para poder ler sua revista Época sossegada.
Promoção Época. A melhor informação merece a melhor promoção.
Vai ser meu parceiro na promoção Circuito Net. Você! Veja como é fácil.
Chegou a vez de quem comprou este ano algum evento em pay-per-view ou canal à la carte ir pra pista com o Rubinho na Itália. Basta preencher e enviar esse cupom até 10 de agosto e torcer. 10 assinantes vão para Monza com tudo pago e 100 vão ganhar um boné especial do Rubinho.
Ganhar essa promoção é mais fácil fazer